first it was unclear. Oh, we're just going to close down for now. And so the first conversation that I had with them was, prepare yourself because this is not like a couple weeks.
This is a different kind of show today, and I had such a great time doing it. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are talking today with Carlos Barriento and also Jessica Garand, who Jessica did, the Opportunity Music Project several years ago. This has been doing El Sistema style work in New York City, a place that has been hit particularly hard by the current pandemic, if you aren't aware. And they have done a particularly good job of pivoting and continuing to work with these students, many of them in challenging economic conditions, which are not helped by a global pandemic, obviously. And this was just a really great conversation. Carlos is a wonderful guy. We will have him on the podcast again to talk a little bit more about his career. We were focused on OMP, the Opportunity Music Project. And yeah, it's inspiring. I am going to play a video, the audio, and we'll link up to the video, of course, too. But the audio about their Sponsor a Student program, I think it's just a great example of what they're doing. But before I do that, I'd like to talk just very briefly about the International Online Bass Summit, which is happening June 24th through the 28th. That's coming up here. And we have quite a lineup. Over 70 at this point, presenters, including people like Gary Carr, John Clayton, Francois Rabath, Dashun Zhang, Andres Martin, Kristen Korb, Chichi Nwanoku. Boy, I mean, I could just look back in the podcast archives and find a lot of names that are at this event. I would love to see you at that event, and you can learn more and register at basssummit.org. I'd also like to talk briefly about one of the sponsors for this event. We have some wonderful sponsors that have come on board. Talk about being brave in challenging times, coming on to sponsor when everything is so uncertain. But Discover Double Bass is one of our sponsors. I don't even know where to start with Discover Double Bass. Jeff Chalmers, who I consider a real friend, one of the few people doing things kind of in my space. So he and I immediately hit it off when we met over video conferencing back, I think that was 2015, and even more so when we met in person in 2016. And we've become close friends and collaborators on many projects. I was actually in England filming 2 courses with Jeff right before the pandemic hit. We have many of the tutors, the lesson teachers from Discover Double Bass, including John Goldsby, Danny Zeman, Marcus Machado. Let's see, do we have any others? Me, I guess. Oh, Joe Conyers, who just came on to do orchestra excerpts. This is the place for online bass learning. I mean, that's Jeff's tagline, or I'm paraphrasing it, but it's true. DiscoverDoubleBass.com is the site. Thank you, Jeff, for sponsoring this event. I have learned so much personally and grown as a player and as a teacher and everything going through these courses. I nerd out and take notes and watch all the videos. So I love it. I'd love you to check it out. DiscoverDoubleBass.com. And thank you so much for sponsoring the Bass Summit, Jeff. Okay, here we go with some audio about the Opportunity Music Project, and then we'll get into our conversation with Carlos and Jessica.
To me, music is inspiring now because of the instrument. It's made me creative, passionate. I've learned a lot of things.
We know that music classes, they're quite pricey. So I think it's really a great opportunity for students, for their parents. I feel grateful.
You have to be really determined to learn an instrument. So with music, I can see a lot of doors opening.
I would describe music as hard work. And what I've learned about hard work is that sometimes the hard work actually pays off.
I'm teaching all my OMP students, and I'm on faculty at Manhattan School of Music pre-college as well, and doing that has transitioned all online as well. And then I have my own program in my hometown in New Jersey, and we've transitioned online. And so it's basically nonstop online.
Oh man, had you done much online teaching before this?
I hadn't. I had tried, and
Yeah.
there were a few lessons here and there. Of course, you can't escape the medium. You have to use it, even in our regular lives. It's just, it has to be used. But I hadn't been forced to, and so this was a good experience to have had, and a nice thing to start to delve into, because the world is kind of moving towards this area. But it's become clear that none of us were ready for it.
No, it's funny, and we're seeing the weaknesses of the current technology with music too. Like you, I'd done a little bit of online teaching, but it was only with adults. It was Skype lessons, and I've been doing stuff vaguely similar to that on Skype for over a decade. But it's never been like my preferred means of communication. And to see people getting thrown in, I'm working with my high school students over FaceTime, and man, listening to the sound of an open E string through an iPhone microphone, I think 5 minutes of that is enough for anybody. I mean,
as long as you can hear it, anytime I try to play the low E on the bass, the technology doesn't even want to take it. It's like, nope, we're just gonna dead air here,
I know, and it's funny because you as the teacher, especially a lot of us might have microphones or some gear or whatever. I've got some decent gear, so I can sound okay if the service is working and I have the settings right and all those ifs. But then my students still sound like garbage, So it's tough. And it just it's obviously an interesting moment for everybody right now. But it makes me think about how else we can be working with these people this time. I don't know if you're familiar with Artist Works or any of the people that have been involved with that over the years. They've been around for a while.
Artist Works?
Yeah, Artist Works. Yeah. And part of what they do online. Hello. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks so much for having me. And Carlos.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for chatting. Carlos and I are just chatting right here. Hopefully Zoom's okay. I'm sort of assuming everybody's gotten a lot more familiar with Zoom than they had been like a month ago. So.
Definitely.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, Jessica and I have been using Zoom for the better part of 2.5, 3 years for some other conferences and online calls.
We have been. But I feel like I've gotten a crash course these past couple of weeks, that's for sure.
Yeah, who knew there were so many options?
Yeah, I always associate Zoom with board meetings. That's the only time I really used Zoom before. And so I was actually just on a 19-person call for folks here in San Francisco. The Symphony funds this education program in the public schools here, and school's been canceled allegedly till May 1st, almost certainly for the rest of the year. And so they're trying to figure out how, everybody's trying to figure out everything right now. So it's so I was on Zoom for that just now.
Yeah. I know. I think that you mentioned it before. It's this is good for us because I think it does force us to really understand this technology a lot. It gives us something else in our toolbox, and I'm really happy that you mentioned the limitations, because it's become obvious how limiting it all is. Just the technology itself, the fact that you even though they call this synchronous learning, there's almost no synchronicity in it, because you can't actually play at the same time, not in a big ensemble. So that takes so much of our music out of it, right? When you can't actually play with somebody else, when I can't influence you non-verbally, which is so much of the way that we communicate with each other is through a lot of body language and non-verbal cues. It means that we must communicate in a completely different way and in a much more intentional way, and just to really make sure that our students understand and sometimes the way that the technology works also highlights our own deficiencies. Maybe there's so much that we could work on that we weren't aware of before.
Oh yeah, it's interesting. It's obviously nobody wants this to be happening, and we're all learning a lot about technology, in a hurry. But it does make me think about different modalities of learning. Like I just got back from England maybe a month and a half ago. I'm glad I did it when I did it, and I shot 2 online courses for this company, Discover Double Bass. We shot for a week, and I've been using their courses with my students and for my own just personal development. And there's something to be said for part of your learning being something like that. I think back to all the countless lessons I've taught and how many times I've told the same dang thing to every student, for like 8 hours a day, and how great it is in some ways to film like your best possible version of that and then have them take that in. And then when you're working with somebody, you have that shared knowledge. And then the other thing, and I was mentioning Artist Works, which has been doing this for a while, they essentially have online, sequential step-by-step lessons, for piano. They're like the master class. You see all those ads on Facebook. They're like that, but for classical music lessons. And they've been around for a while. But what their teachers actually do is the student will record a video of them, and then the teacher will watch and then record a video back, just giving them some advice or maybe playing the video back and talking through like a play-by-play, like in a sports game. And I'll be interested to see if people start to do more of that, because then, yeah, it's asynchronous, but if you use a good mic, they're going to get better sound quality, even if it's just their phone mic, certainly with the USB mic. So it'll be interesting to see, because we're so close with this technology here, but it's that last mile that we're missing, right? That just music needs. And then obviously that not being able to play with other musicians, especially as bass players, it's like, that's nobody, when I started playing bass to be like a solo player, I don't think. So it's particularly weird for us.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting though, because there was like I remember a few years ago, I have a student who might actually hear this, so I won't mention his name. And he, it was college audition times. The application time was coming around, and I was on him. I told him, start recording now in September. Start recording now. Start getting used to this, because it's a big process. And of course, that advice wasn't taken. And Thanksgiving comes around, and now December 1st is rolling in, and he's like, okay, now it's time to start. And you know what? He missed a lot of the deadlines because it took forever, just because we're not even used to using technology for what we use. This might be the simplest example of like this need to use technology, what we're doing right now. But we don't really incorporate it as much as we should. And I think that us as musicians, we need to become a little more robustly knowledgeable of how it all works, because artists in general throughout history have always been at the forefront of new technology and new mediums for performance and for art making. And, we're always the first ones to implement it because we're forced to do it or else we can't eat. So I think that this again is our new opportunity. We have to see how we deal with this, because a lot of artists are about to enter into a really, really uncertain time. And this is, this could make or break our community in some sense, just for the next month, even a few months. And it's not just our community. I mean, a lot of the country was already living in a precarious situation. And so, who knows what the next few months are going to spell out and the ramifications of this time for the next few years.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I was just chatting with a woman named Susan Cahill yesterday for the podcast. She's in the Colorado Symphony, teaches at the University of Denver. Fortunately, has a lot of other side projects, but she was, so that orchestra is furloughed now for the rest of the season, as are so many people. And she was saying, at some point, people are going to be ready for live music again, but maybe not in really big groups for a while. So she's doubling down on her duo project, her trio project. Maybe we'll be able to get together in groups of 10 again, in the next few months. So we'll see. But I'd love to hear. And I'd love to ask Jessica and then both of you, because like I was saying, I was just. Oh, and by the way, these are. I never have any agenda for these, but I'm happy to go and edit out anything or so. They're very much not live, but we'll just sort of see where we go. But like I said, before I got on the line with you, I was just chatting with this group of almost 20 educators trying to figure out what to do with this San Francisco Symphony education program and then Opportunity Music Project. I'm sure that you've had to adjust a lot from where, and I was thinking, Jessica, before you hopped on, Carlos and I were talking about like our experiences online teaching before this. And, I've taught some online, always to adults. But I've worked with a lot. I used to teach public school myself. I've worked with a lot of elementary, middle school kids, and I just can't imagine what it's like adjusting to that when you're working with like 12-year-olds or 15-year-olds. It's just it's really, so I'd love to just hear, maybe we could start just about the program in general, Jessica, or however you want to do it. And then maybe how you've responded to what's been happening the last couple of months, 6 weeks.
Sure. Yeah, I can jump in, Jason.
Okay.
So just to give you a bit of a background, Opportunity Music Project is a program that I started in New York City about 8 years ago. We provide free and low-cost music instruction to students on all string instruments, so violin, viola, cello, and we started with double bass 3 years ago. And what we try to do is really just to provide the best quality music education that we can to kids who wouldn't otherwise be able to have access to this kind of training. So we do private lessons and orchestra, music theory. And basically, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, we moved all of our programming to online in the course of about 3 days. And so
it was really quick. I was surprised how quick it was.
Basically, we realized that we had to do this. We had an orchestra rehearsal on Sunday. We realized that we need to do this on Friday. So after a bunch of calls and the realization from our theory teacher that he could mute all of his students, he was on board. And we had a pretty seamless transition. And you know what? It's been a lot of fun. I think there are so many cool things that we can experiment with, that we're in the process of experimenting with. We're in the process of putting together one of these virtual orchestras. It's going to be just a super fun experience for everyone. We're going to do some master classes with some people from your side of the country, Jason, who we would normally not be able to have a master class with these people because we just don't use Zoom. But now everyone's on Zoom. We're just starting to experiment with Zoom and to have some fun with the platform. So we're going to be doing a master class with someone from the other side of the country, bringing that person in to work with our students. And we'd never normally have the opportunity to do that kind of thing. So we're going to be also trying a virtual orchestra project with our students. We're going to actually bring in some of our donors and sponsors too to join on their instruments. So in a way, we are kind of doing some activities that feel more connected than how we were operating previously. So it's kind of fun to see what we can do.
Well, if you were on that call I was just on with all those teachers, they would be yelling at me if I didn't ask more about the virtual orchestra, because everybody's trying to figure out how do we do. So what are you envisioning in terms of that? Like, are you going to have a recording that people play along, or just like, what are the nuts and bolts of that? Or maybe you don't have it all figured out, but just share anything you got in terms of that.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is pretty simple. We're going to have a metronome tracker. So it's going to just be a tempo. And then on top of that, we're going to record a teacher playing the part that each student is playing. So we'll have someone playing along with the metronome on violin, viola, cello, and bass. Carlos, now you know. And then we'll be sending that out to each student, each sponsor, whoever would like to join the group. So then the students will send their video back to us, and we will edit them into to a compilation. We can do a lot of different things with that. We're actually working with a volunteer organization that's helping us put it together. They do a lot of video editing, and they're just really up for helping us in whatever way they can, during this time. So they're excited about the project too.
Well, it'll be great to see. Congratulations on getting on top of that quickly and going remote quickly. I know I've been following the news in New York City and state, and it looks pretty rough. And it, 8 years of the program, we got this moment, and we'll all be on the other side of this, and it'll be interesting to see how when you do start to have the opportunity to come back together as in person, in ensembles, how you might do things differently, learning what you've learned through this whole process, or are learning.
I think that's exactly correct. I mean, this gives us, a lot of the reason why we couldn't do anything like this before isn't because there wasn't any will or any need for it. But I think that to educate so many people on how to use this technology and for everyone to become more familiar with it seems to be too much of an undertaking. Now that everyone, that includes the students, the teachers, the parents, everyone is a little more familiar with it, I think that we can all come together and really assess how to go forward and how we can implement it once we're over this hill.
What are you telling your students, just in terms, and again, just having chatted with a lot of pretty panicked educators and parents and stuff over the last few weeks, what are you telling them in terms of so it sounds like you're using Zoom or predominantly Zoom. What are you using? Are you giving them any recommendations on microphones? And I know it's tough, it's tough times for everybody here, but especially if you're working with people that might not have a lot of extra change to throw around in terms of buying gear. How are you addressing the fact that you can't hear the E string through a pinhole camera?
I haven't been messing with the hardware too much, especially for the population that our program serves. We're an El Sistema based program, so we have a lot of the ideals of El Sistema. And it was enough to make sure that all of our students even had, like an iPad or a laptop or a phone device that could take Zoom, And, I have to give props to the New York City public school system because they were also giving out free iPads to any family that needed it. They had to close down the school. So they had to make sure that everyone was able to do online learning. And so that was helpful. As far as navigating how best to go about it, it was really like experimenting on, is Zoom going to work better than FaceTime or WhatsApp or whatnot, Mm-hmm. So it was a little experimenting in that sense with the students. As far as navigating the sound, there's nothing that's going to make the sound better. I mean, we discovered in Zoom that you could put on original sound, but that only works on a computer.
Yeah.
And I learned this last week, and I was so happy about it. But I think that as far as the teacher goes, we just have to focus on different things, and I've gotten to a place where I'm focusing on different things that are not the sound. That being the case, now that I've entered into week 3 of doing this, I'm actually able to pick up on nuances in the sound that I wasn't able to before. Now I know if you're playing legato or not, or if it's like how much pressure you're putting in the string, that I'm so surprised that I'm able to actually hear these differences, even with the limitations of the sound quality.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly you can adjust to the new norm. I've been noticing that with I only have a couple of private students personally, but I've been noticing that. And the first lesson, we both were just rocking it with our iPhones and no headphones or anything. It was like an absolutely terrible experience always. The next lesson, I had headphones on. He did not. The next lesson, he had headphones on. I had headphones. I had a good mic on. And it's anything like that can help a lot. Anything else other than like adjusting to the sound and being able to hear that you've learned now 3 weeks of online lessons, that like if you could go back and talk to Carlos from like 6 weeks ago and give him some advice about online lessons, what would you say?
Oh goodness.
Sorry, that's a hard question, but
well, I would first tell my students that even though you're in your house, it's not appropriate to wear pajamas for a lesson. Two, it's I think that the thing that's been hardest to really deal with is the focus, because there was a time a really long time ago when I was starting to teach, that I was going to people's houses. I didn't realize it then, and it wasn't until I got more experience and was teaching in the studio that I saw that my students were much more focused in the studio than they are in their own space. And even I'm in my living room and I'm very comfortable here, but I'm not as focused as I am when I'm in the studio. And so it's not just the student, it's us too. And there's so much distraction around. I'm a professional, so I'm able to compartmentalize the distractions, but these kids are not, and their parents aren't used to learning in this situation either. So, I've heard so many babies screaming at this point. I've heard parents calling the other children. I've heard a lot of TV in the background. These things that you can't micromanage, and you don't have enough time to ask them to really quiet down. You can only remind them for next time. If for all my first year students, I do the best that I can to teach them how to tune. And so that was also something that I'm glad I had taught a lot of my students. A lot of the younger ones, though, aren't able to do it. And so that has caused a bit of, a drawback. And we've implemented something with that on our side. We send out all the kids links so that they can, there's this online tuner that they can use, or they can download one. So that was something, if I could go back, I would definitely get them to do that. And I would also have given them a huge packet of music to work on, so that I don't have to literally email every single student something and then wonder if they actually wrote in it and what they're seeing and all that. So, because my MO is just to kind of give them as we go,
Yeah.
Barring all of the AT folks and all that.
Yeah, no, me too. I've had the same exact issue. It was like, oh, I want to give you this. Can I email it to you? Well, you're on the device that you would be getting the email. So I guess we'll do it next week. And so then I have to, so I think, and chatting with some other teachers, there's a whole lot of kind of administrative burden that we're kind of going through. We're tech support. We're trying to keep track of a lot more things. Whereas like you're describing, just being able to pull out something from my bag and give it to them as you go in the moment. It seems like there's a little bit more planning ahead, and not being able to have that studio space, or you got a little more skin in the game, I think, when you have to go somewhere. And so that's that I can see the environments you're describing right now. I'm seeing that myself with my couple of students. So it's a
but
challenge.
we've actually our bass studio, which Jessica mentioned, that we started 3 years ago. Actually, we started it 4 years ago, but that bass studio 4 years ago was literally one student, and now it's 14 students. So, we're kind of doing a little experiment with them, and we're trying to find ways that we can make our students more independent and more self-starter and more confident in what they do. And, so in that strain, like, we have seen that at least I have seen that my bass students they are a little more self-initiated, and they have to be, they're more likely now. Most of them, I usually communicate with their parents. I haven't had their email addresses until these past few weeks, where they're the ones that are prompting me. Can you send me the email and let me answer you and let me print this out? And, so they're doing a lot of more things on their own without being told, which is actually, that's one plus that I'm really happy about, because I have to do a lot less micromanaging. And it's hard because there's this whole psychology aspect of it that everyone is a little, everyone's in a different place emotionally right now, and it's really hard to judge where the kid's emotional state is, because they have nothing to compare this to, So we're there to, on top of being tech support and all this, we're kind of like psychologists too, because we have this one-on-one, situation with them. And that's been maybe the hardest thing to deal with, because we're also going through it. So how do you navigate, like, do I pretend that everything's okay? Like,
yeah, it's hard. Like, it's just hard. One of my private students, he's really into sports. And so about, 5 minutes of the lessons is just talking about Bay Area sports. Well, that's not a fun topic anymore. And now he's in his house all the time. The one outlet is gone. All I said, because I hadn't even checked in on ESPN, but I said, like, what's even playing on ESPN now? And he's like, classic games, who got the virus, and that's about it. And so, it's
everything is about the virus. Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah, but it's tough with these young people. Yeah, we are in this I've found ourselves in these cycle. I mean, teachers are always psychologists to a degree, but like now navigating this, and as we're navigating it, and then of course, musicians, I'm sure for you, and I know for everybody listening to this, a giant percentage, or maybe 100% of their work has evaporated, right? And so everybody, it's a stressful time for everybody, from the kids to us to broader society, obviously.
Yeah, but I mean, in the end, I think that we're all going to come out of this a little stronger, and with a little more, awareness for each other, and a little more understanding that all the trivial stuff that we go through, actually, in the end, isn't that big of a deal. So it might have a positive outlook for the future. And going back to these bass students, I think that, they already deal with a lot, and my philosophy with them has mirrored a lot of my own learning that I went through, and a lot of that which I think that a lot of bass players would share, is basically just being thrown into the situation. It's like, okay, you know how to play a scale, right? Great, now go do it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what Jessica thinks, but I think that it's worked out pretty well, and our students have done a lot. And actually, it was a little disappointing for them that we canceled, because the first week of our quarantine, Joseph Conyers was going to come and give us a master class at Carnegie, and the entire bass studio was going to play. And so we had been working for this since like November. And so we were ready. And so what a disappointment that it wasn't going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was hard to explain to them, because that was right at the beginning. They really didn't. It's like the whole world is falling. There's no school. All this stuff that we've been working for is canceled for who knows when, and that communication has been difficult, because at first it was unclear. Oh, we're just going to close down for now. And so the first conversation that I had with them was, prepare yourself, because this is not like a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. And even though they're telling you it's a couple weeks, it's probably going to be 2 months, Mm-hmm. And some of them heard that first from me, which maybe that made me the bad guy with them, but we needed to be on the same page that, take this serious, because we have to learn how to do this, or else, we're going to be in a different place.
Well, I'm sure Joe was sad not to be able to make it out. Hopefully that'll happen, after we're all through this. And I got to ask, so going from 1 bass student to 14 bass students in the program, congratulations. Over a few years, that's cool. How did that grow? Was it from kids within the program? Was it from other friends of that initial student? Or, we're always trying to grow our studio, our program. Just how did that happen?
So we actually have this partnership with Carnegie Hall. It's a grant called Play USA. And I had been working with Carlos and with his student for that 1 year. And when Carlos's student, the one double bass student in the program, joined our orchestra, I mean, we heard the difference immediately. And so I knew that we just had to get more bass students in the program as soon as we could. And so the next year we got 14.
Wow.
Well, once you hear the bass, you can't go back, huh?
It's true. You don't know what you're missing till you get that. All of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, the 16-foot register, it's like throughout culture, like every ensemble going back hundreds of years has had that. And if you don't have that, all of a sudden it's like not cooking with oil. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wasn't there was this letter that Mozart wrote to his father that I remember reading, where he had seen this orchestra in Germany somewhere, in some town that he was visiting, and he was writing about how big the orchestra was, but to emulate this, all he wrote was that there were 14 basses in this orchestra. Now, I don't know what German orchestra at the time this was. So, they always tell us to reduce the strings for classical period music, but I don't know that they were reducing anything in this orchestra. So I think that we hit a good number with 14, because that's what Mozart experienced and he wanted it clearly. Oh yeah.
It's remarkable. You really, it only makes it better having more basses. And I say that not as a bass player selfishly, but I used to teach orchestra, and having extra bass, it's nothing but good. I actually usually go to Tijuana for a music festival in the fall, and Andres Martin is the name of the person who organizes it, and he has a piece. He plays in the Baja California Orchestra, and they do a piece with that orchestra, and the entire bass attendees, which have been over 50 sometimes. So we actually play, and he'll write a piece for that specific and you know what? You'd think 50 bass players will cover up the orchestra, and this is a pretty small orchestra. They don't cover it up. I mean, they definitely add a certain presence, but it's remarkable.
That sounds great. That's like Rabat's like bass orchestras.
Yeah.
Have you seen those?
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you say that the bass players don't, or that giant bass section isn't covering the orchestra up, because we're always being shushed. You know? And so you have like a bunch of bass players that are like scared to play out because they're gonna be shushed. But I'm of the mentality, shush us if you need to. But I'm gonna play.
Yeah, and maybe the others need to play more. That's what I would say.
Yeah. But I think that
we have to play out more too.
Right.
Similar predicament.
That's true. Oh, viola. This is viola is the instrument that you can never hear enough of.
Yeah.
I always want more viola. Always. Mm-hmm. I love the viola. Anyway, no, but to answer the question from the beginning here, I think that we just owe this recruiting to Jessica's recruiting prowess. She did a really good job of recruiting basses, and you know we have quite a wait list. We only have like a certain number of spots in the group, and so it's not just getting the bass players, but it's also like making sure that they have the full package, that they're going to be invested in our program, because for the most part, the bass players are here on scholarship. So, you know, the instrument is provided for them, and they get private lessons, they get theory, they get ear training, and they get ensemble work. And actually, our bass players are not just in one of 3 different orchestras. They also participate in a bass ensemble that we started this year. And so, and I've been writing some arrangements for them based on the orchestral literature. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunities for them, but they have to be serious as well, you know? And so 3 years ago, actually our original bass student is no longer with us. He's now studying with Eugene Levinson at Juilliard Pre-College. And so the other bass players that are with us are from that initial class that started 3 years ago. And then there's about like 2 or 3 that are brand new. So we've been replacing as people have moved away or gone to other programs. We had another student that's now at Brooklyn College, started, and she just started her undergrad there. So we've been replacing, but the one interesting thing that, you know, Jessica's really good at making me uncomfortable, but also like edging me into like, you can do it, just do it. And so the one thing I remember having this first conversation with her, when she was like, so like half of the bass students are like 6, 7, and 8 years old. And I'm like, no, don't do this to me. Like, it's impossible. We just don't start that early, you know? And I certainly had never taught any student that young, or at least any bass student that young. And in a private setting, absolutely not. So with her encouragement, I reluctantly said yes. And, you know, I'm really happy that I did, because I think that this kind of sets us apart. You don't have a lot of programs that even cater to this group, period, but let alone for bass players. And as the level of our instrument increases, and who knows where that top is going to be, because it seems to the level seems to go up and up and up. like every few years, and the expectations become more, it's clear that we need to be starting earlier, and we can start earlier. I think that, we've entered a time where the pedagogy for our instrument has become a little more standardized. We have a few different schools of playing, but the last half of the 20th century really the pedagogues of this period did a good job of compiling a nice standardization for how we can go about learning. And I think that has caused this increase in the quality of bass playing. And now that so much more is expected, we can start them younger. And we understand how to deal with that. And even though I had my own learning curve, I've started to develop my own method for that younger group. The only thing that I haven't become really familiar with, at least not in a certifiable way, is a Suzuki training for bass players, which is almost like the new thing. I think that's going to take over for bass soon. And there are a few Suzuki certified bass teachers out there. But I think that method was it's fairly new. It was just developed for bass.
Yeah, we're getting there with bass. I was at the Suzuki Association of the Americas conference 2 years ago, and sat in on the whole bass track there, and it was really. I'm not Suzuki certified either, but I was. It was really interesting to see what people are doing, where they're at, and I think a big challenge is what you're describing is that the tools are now there. The pedagogy has been developed. We have smaller basses now. They're getting easier to get, but I didn't start bass until I was older. You the same, I'm sure, probably. And like you were saying, a lot of us just kind of fall into it in this kind of, like I was a very mediocre violinist. And then my teacher basically like, here, try this. Here's my 5 minute lesson and go, and so like having like organized pedagogy with those 5, 6 year olds, it's happening, but we didn't experience that. But I think if we go to the violin world or so many other instruments, when Suzuki if we go back to the 60s, that was new for teachers of the violin too. Now that's much more standard. Congratulations to you and Jessica and the program for getting that going. Because like once you get them in and once you get those young students, then people realize it's possible. They say, oh, they're doing it. Then it's just getting the momentum going on that's so tough. And a lot of programs don't do it, so it's really cool that you're doing that.
A lot of programs don't do it because there's first of all, you need the expertise. You need a good bass teacher in there, and so a lot of organizations don't even know how to go about finding that teacher. Just finding talent is hard. And not just for bass, for any instrument, we had a lot of growing pains with the small instruments. So we did get those small 8-size instruments or 10-size instruments. No, they're 8-size, right? Yeah, 8-size instruments.
We completely cleared out all of the bass, the fractional size bassists. I think I want to say in the country, but I think no, I think we found them all in Boston and we shipped them all to New York. So they're getting easier to get, but as you've experienced, they're still not easy to get, and there are waiting lists. And they're making them down to 1/32 size basses. Yeah. I have some photo or video of me from years ago playing this 1/32 size bass, which I believe that's the one that's up an octave. So the 16th size is still at the original pitch, with these hilarious rubber band thickness, strings. But it's getting easier, but it's still not like getting a fractional violin. Certainly.
No, it's not. And then in fact, they're more expensive. Yeah. The smaller instruments are more expensive to rent and perhaps to buy.
Yeah, they're very prohibitively expensive.
It's weird. It's counterintuitive, right? Because it's like it's less wood. And so I think the bass world is catching up, but it's still like we're getting there. Kate Jones is one of the Suzuki teacher trainers in the U.S. And I think she is the chair of the double bass area of the Suzuki SAA. And so we've had a lot of conversations about availability of instruments, and it's getting better. There's some more companies getting on making them, but there've been just a limited number of people even making them. So again, congratulations for like clearing those hurdles, because once it happens, it's a beautiful thing. And I visited Kate, who's based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and her job is she's in suburban Dallas. She is a full-time Suzuki double bass teacher in the Texas public schools. That is her job. So I walk in and a room of 6-year-olds all playing bass, like 17 6-year-olds all playing bass. It's just like, you think, wow, what's that going to do, if we go forward 10 years, 15 years, beyond, No,
but that's what you need. Look, I think that, Suzuki training is interesting because the focus is so much on the ear and not on like a reading or understanding music from a theoretical point of view, just like playing and hearing and listening, which honestly is, I love the philosophy because it's so important for what we do. What I've realized with our students is that even without like a proper Suzuki training, their ears are, kids are just superheroes, and they have these magical powers, but their ears are just so much better than like an adult's or even an older teenager's ears can be. Like, this is the time to develop those ears. And as a bass player, intonation, it's the most important thing we do. We're just like setting the foundation of all harmonies. So we better be playing well in tune. We better be, giving the ensemble that foundation that they need. And it's really difficult to hear the low sounds, and it becomes even harder as you get older, And then sometimes I wonder, like, if my low register is going or not. It becomes unclear whether it's still there. And I realize that sometimes you can, with the cacophony of the ensemble, you can't actually hear what you're doing. You're behind the instrument, the sound is going forward, so you're not totally hearing it. But there's a feeling that vibration gives you that lets you know that it's good. I don't know if you've experienced that, but
for sure.
This is like the vibration is correct. So it's like I'm playing in tune, even though I can't necessarily hear it. But maybe that's just because it's blending so well. I don't know.
That's one of the unique things about our instrument, I think. Jeff Braditich, who teaches at the University of North Texas now, but well known in the bass world, back in the 80s, I think, late 80s, he put out a series of albums called Music for All to Hear. And his double bass music, people who are hard of hearing, be able to feel those vibrations and that register. It's an interesting. And there's actually a bassist in Puerto Rico named Hector Tirado, who is deaf, can't hear, and he reads lips great. We've actually done an interview. He's just reading my lips and responding, but he plays very well. He plays in tune. How does this work? He studied with Gary Carr for a bunch of years, and just it's totally fascinating. And I'm sure tuba has a similar experience just in terms of the vibration and those lower instruments and that register.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've heard a lot about like deaf and hearing impaired individuals playing percussion. But it makes sense for bass as well. I never understood how boomy our instrument is and how percussive our instrument is until I heard myself in recordings. And I was like, oh, I'm doing way too much. I need to step back. Because again, like there's because you're behind the instrument, it feels distant, and you don't really get the power of it until you're listening to it from the front. But yeah, I think so in the end, I think that just going back to our OMP students, I'm really hopeful for the future with them, because now most of them are on year 3, and there's a certain point where you're wondering where the progress is going, because you're there the entire for the entire length, and so sometimes it's so gradual that you don't even notice it. But a few months ago, one of our students was just sight reading in front of me, and she sight read this whole thing, and I almost cried because I didn't know it was possible. But that's after 3 years, and these are those moments of verification that you are putting them on the right track, and this program is working to their benefit, and it's reciprocal, right? They've received so much from the program, and now you see them giving back. You see them volunteering for different things and helping each other out, unquestionably. Everyone is always coming in to be part of a community, and they're really learning how to treat each other and how to belong to a society such as an orchestra or an ensemble, where everyone is important, and even though there's like a figurehead director, everyone is directing in a certain sense, and we're all leading each other, and we're all following each other at the same time. And that's kind of our ethos that we're trying to give them. And it seems like they're picking it up as they grow older, which is great to see.
It's beautiful. Well, Carlos, Jessica, I come to New York once a year, not for the next few months, certainly, but I would love to spend some time and see the program in action. And I try to get to New York whenever I can and just do interviews. And so it'd be great to see the actual program in action and chat with you, Carlos, about some things non-virus related. And this has been super, super interesting. I will send people to your social media, to your website. Obviously, is there anything else either of you want to get out the word about? Is there anything? I mean, I know that it's a pretty chaotic time for the world, but if people are listening and they want to support the program somehow, besides obviously everybody should subscribe to your YouTube channel and other social media and follow. But is there anything that folks can do more specifically to help out?
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead, Carlos.
No, I was just gonna say that, and I'm sure that Jessica is about to mention this, but right now all of our students are guaranteed a half-hour private lesson a week, and we've initiated a year ago a new program called our Sponsor Student Campaign, and for $12 a month of your tax-deductible contribution, you can actually sponsor one of our students, and their lesson time after 5 sponsors is increased to an hour a week. So we all know that the more lesson time you have, the faster you increase your progress. So this is one way that we would love for the general public to support us.
And it's really fun because sponsors get a video of their student who they've sponsored at the beginning of the year, and then they get another video at the end of the year to see how much their impact has really helped the student grow. And one of our first sponsored students actually was one of Carlos's double bass students, and she was just applying for specialized music high schools here in New York City, which is very competitive. And a year later,
she got into,
and she got in. Yeah, so I think that really helped her.
Well, I'll get the word out about that, and congratulations to both of you. But Jessica, I mean, going back 8 years, so many people I meet talk about trying to start something new or get something going, but I get so motivated and inspired when I see people who actually make something happen, and it's just really it sounds like your program's a testament to what an idea can bring, and then bringing that to folks in New York, it's just beautiful. So hope to meet in person one of these days soon, and just thanks for chatting.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you.
Carlos, you rock. Thank you for joining me. Jessica, thank you for hopping on board and chatting about this program. And like I said in this conversation, I can't wait to check out the program in action the next time I'm in New York City. Who knows when that's going to be, obviously, but I love going on location and seeing programs like this in action. I've been doing that for years. I'm a former high school orchestra director. I don't remember if we talked about that in this interview or not, but I've been involved in education in many capacities, not just teaching bass. And I love seeing how things are structured, how programs work with different students from different socioeconomic backgrounds and different parts of the country and internationally. And it probably is obvious from the way this conversation went that I'm interested in that, but I just applaud the work that they're both doing and everybody involved in OMP. So very cool. I love having conversations like this that, bass is kind of the container into which we're fitting this conversation, but obviously it's not much about bass at all, except how horrible open E strings sound on a smartphone microphone. So thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening during a time when it's quite likely that you're not listening to a lot of podcasts, since most people listen to them when they're driving, which you're probably not doing a lot of, or being outside, walking around or running, which you're probably doing less of or likely doing less of. So making time to listen to this and get to the point where I'm talking to you here at the end, oh my goodness, you are either kidnapped and being forced to listen to Contrabass Conversations, or you're a true fan. So in the first case, I wish there was something I could do to help you. In the second case, thank you for being on this journey. If you're new, well, we have an archive for you. Contrabassconversations.com will take you all the way back to the painful first episode of the podcast. And that site will also take you, I'm going to try to not edit this one, also take you into all the other things that we do from our email newsletter, which has become quite large, surprisingly. I never thought it would grow like it has, but that has become kind of a key thing that we do. So you can jump on that if you're not. And of course, social media, all the usual suspects there. And I try to do weekly blog posts over at the blog. Again, just go to that contrabassconversations.com. You'll find it. It's been much easier to do weekly blog posts now that I've been stuck at home. We'll see how that goes as we be our less at home. Uh-oh, I'm starting to fade. So I better cut it short here. Contrabass Conversations is produced by Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Trevor Jones, Mitch Mooring, and Krista Copper. Trevor makes beautiful basses. Maybe he does, but I'm not aware of that. Mitch Mooring makes beautiful award-winning basses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and he's organizing the luthier track for the Bass Summit. How cool is that? MitchMooring.com is his website, and one more plug for the Bass Summit, basssummit.org. Join me and Mitch and hundreds of other people there this June 24th through the 28th. Give yourself a little bit of inspiration and come say hi. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.